Hey, welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. We've still got some people attend or starting to attend and jump on, but we want to start promptly, so we don't want to keep those who are here waiting. So we'll kick it off and people can join as they come. So just first of all, thank you to everyone who's taken the time to actually join us today. Today we're going to talk about how ransomware has changed the role of backup in kind of the great IT organization and how it's no longer about an auditor's compliance checkbox or simple data recovery. It's about survival now. And if your backups are gone, your business could be down for days, weeks, or as we've seen in some of the large scale attacks recently, even worse. So my name is Jonathan Kropf, and I'm the founder of Lusty Technology Group. And with my co-presenters today, we're going to explore how backup and security must now work together, and how to build true resilience in your backup environments. I realize that there's some names on this call that I don't recognize, which means you probably don't know who we are or what we do in any great detail. So I thought I'll spend kind of 2 or 3 minutes just going through that and positioning who we are and what we do. And for those of you who are on the call that do deal with us, you may actually learn something because often we only deal with a company based on a specific area, and we don't realize what other things the capabilities are. So, by a bit of background, we were founded in 2007 when cloud was just really an S3 bucket somewhere in Jeff's brain. And Azure wasn't even launched yet. So that's how far back we go and how we've seen things changed. It was a very different time, and it's significantly different in the solutions and the way we deploy things now. So with a long history in the industry and a diverse customer base across varying geographies and verticals such as hospitality, banking, insurance, logistics, manufacturing, not-for-profit, we're able to deliver hybrid IT solutions for our customers from keyboard to cloud. But what does that actually mean? So we don't get involved in line of business applications, building AI models, custom development, or any of those type of things. Simplistically, we're here to help ensure that our customers are able to deploy their business solutions in an efficient and, more importantly, secure way. That doesn't matter if it's on-premise, in the cloud, or a combination of those being hybrid. So by way of analogy and as an example, for those of you who know me, I love a good analogy. So the Shard in this picture is an architectural masterpiece and kind of a prominent landmark on the London skyline. Our London office is actually just below it, not in it. We can't afford that yet, but just below it. And my sister, who's an architect, thinks it's a wonderful piece of design. It's one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the world. Cost, hundreds of millions of pounds to build. And if you haven't worked it out, the building is the application. So now if you walk into that building and you can't switch on the lights, use the lifts, so anyone can walk in and kind of take something from the offices, or even worse, the toilets don't flush. Well, that's a massive problem. And basically, it's a large, unusable lump of concrete and steel with millions wasted on it. Kind of like the shelfware projects that I've seen over my last 28 years in the industry now. Um, so does it mean we're the plumbers and the electricians of the IT world? Yes, we're not ashamed to say that that is where we focus. We make sure that the fundamentals are right so that you're able to deliver applications and projects that deliver real business value. And over the last 18 years, we've built quite a comprehensive set of brand partnerships that allows us to actually add our significant technical services offering to supplying technology and deliver on this hybrid cloud capability for our customers, no matter where they are. So as an example, we're able to supply Dell or HP or Lenovo or Microsoft Surface or whatever your preferred notebook brand is, but also make sure that it's deployed in an efficient and secure way by setting up Autopilot and Intune to do this versus having the old method of fingers on keyboards or buttons on seats and the physical people in place to deploy those. So we take the physical item, tie it together with the cloud and services aspect, and deliver significant value for our customers. So some of these brands may resonate with you, and I'm sure many of you are users of some of these. And if you need any assistance with them, we're happy to help and supply solutions around them. That's a little bit about Velocity. I didn't want to stick too much time based on that. That's not what we're here for today. What we actually here for today is that we've seen, and we don't do many webinars, probably one or two a year, and usually it's around a topic that's popping up in our customer base that's really relevant. So in many of our customer engagements, and even in our own teams internally, we've seen that this scenario has played out. There's an inherent tension between IT operations and security, and this is usually prior to an incident, during an incident, or post recovery of an incident. The tensions are there. IT operations by nature are focused on speed, availability, keeping the business running, prioritizing rapid recovery, delivery, minimal disruption. Security, by contrast, are focused on things like risk reduction, control, long-term resilience, prioritizing evidence in investigations, governance, containment, kind of the antithesis of what the IT operations team is there to do. Now, you can see how that would cause an immediate fight between the two organizations, or the two silos. So these opposing pressures aren't a failure of either team. It's a structural reality. There's a good reason why they are there and there to do that. And effective organizations that we've seen recognize this. They redesign their processes to balance both perspectives, and rather than forcing one to override the other, they work together. We even have one organization or one customer where the IT operations or the IT infrastructure manager is the security director as well, which is an extreme way of doing it. And he often says, well, when somebody brings him in a requirement, he has to fight with himself, which is better than fighting with someone else. So it does work in some situations, and they've got a super environment and very well looked after infrastructure. So it does work. And if we look at the anatomy of a modern ransomware attack and we understand how it works, you can see how these two worlds basically become linked. These two areas of IT operations and security, they have to work together to strategically combat ransomware. So ransomware generally starts quietly. It's a phishing email, a vulnerable system. Attacker moves laterally, escalates privileges, and then ultimately disables backups. Only then do they launch the ransomware attack. So this is what the security team is trying to prevent. But by the time you realize what's happening, your recovery options are gone. IT operations are left to carry the can with massive business impact and pressure. So you can see how potential clashes in teams happen and how finger pointing often follows. Not an ideal situation. Attackers are getting smarter as well. So almost all ransomware attacks will target the backup environment. And why is that? Well, it's quite simple. It's commercial. Because if you can recover from a backup, you won't pay. So they make sure you can't. They disable the backup agents, delete snapshots, corrupt retention policies, even encrypt the backup volumes themselves. But here's something that people don't often think about. Backups often contain everything, all your data, all in one nice, convenient place wrapped up for attackers to get hold of. So it makes them the prime target, not just for destruction, but also for data theft. Once again, bringing the security teams back into the environment to protect that data. Unfortunately, many backup systems are still treated as internal-only tools. Shared credentials, minimal segmentation, and very little monitoring is often in place. So that makes them very easy prey. So when we say backup is now a security discussion, this is generally what we mean. If your backups are unprotected, like your crown jewels, you're ultimately vulnerable. When backups are compromised, the consequences can be quite severe. Ransom demands invariably go up. As soon as they realize you don't have backups in place or they've compromised those backups, that ransomware demand can increase significantly. Recovery will take longer. Business impact is usually devastating. In one case study that we had a look at, a small engineering firm lost 3 years of design files and had to spend, I think it was over £200,000 to recreate them, all because their cloud backups had soundly failed and they assumed that the MSP was looking at them and they weren't, and that they were working. Now, interestingly enough, this report actually wasn't from one of the technology companies trying to scare anyone. This was from an insurance company that kind of was highlighting the fact that without cyber insurance in place, this company would have folded. It was only 4 users, and the financial impact was massive. So no cyber insurance, they would have gone under purely from a ransomware attack and backups not being in place. So we can't afford to treat backup and security as separate disciplines anymore. Attackers don't really care about your org chart. They'll exploit any gap between teams. So that's why CISOs and IT operations directors need to align on a shared strategy for resilience. So this picture here is an example of our Velocity Security Operations Service, which shows attempts to log into our 365 tenant And that's only for the last, well, for 7-day period. All the red ones are failed login attempts. So you can see green and yellow is kind of where our offices are. So those are all kind of fine. Red being failed. And I'm really not sure why people in the Far East are so interested in logging into our tenant, but it kind of surprised me. I thought it would be more around Eastern Europe based, but Far East came up as quite significant attempts to compromise us. Now, we're not a big company, but we definitely need to have the processes and systems in place as if we are. And unfortunately, so do everyone on this call. As an aside, if you actually want a map like that of your 365 tenant, talk to our team. Usually quite helpful in visualizing something to non-technology people on why there's a risk out there and what needs to be done. So just chat to us. We can help with that. So resilience starts with assumption that attackers will get in. So we need to focus on recovery. That means hardening backup systems, isolating them from the network, and testing them regularly. It means planning together IT and security for how we'll respond when the worst actually happens. So for years, we've spoken about 3-2-1 as the gold standard for backup resilience. However, the world has changed significantly as we know. So 15 years ago, 15 years ago, 3-2-1 was fine. We still had cloud, and we could dump some backups in a repository somewhere else. But this new 3-2-1-1-0 approach that I think I may have started from Darren, so you might have to either not talk about it or remove it from your slides. Apologies, Darren, but I quite like it. This ensures you have redundancy and diversity and isolation, and ultimately confidence that your backup environment is going to work. So it's not just about having the backups; it's about having the right backups in the right places with the right protections. But most importantly, it's creating an environment that is tested regularly. Um, we also often throw around these terms of immutability and air-gapped quite a bit, but what really is the difference? So in my mind, air-gapped, it's completely isolated. Attackers can't reach an air-gapped environment. Immutable backups are connected, but locked down. And Darren's going to talk a bit more about that in his session. But either option creates a barrier to any kind of attack and makes it difficult for attackers to gain access to those backups. The gold standard is, I guess, using those together because they could give you speed, security, and resilience. And when we often recommend combining both to customers, and we can help build solutions that work with that in our customers' particular architecture because not everyone is the same. An example of that is in this kind of picture here is an Azure-based customer that we built a completely air-gapped second DR subscription for. So they had no on-prem environment, all sitting in Azure. And the second subscription is a completely separate subscription. It's not just a sub-subscription. It's almost a completely separate Azure tenant. And this environment is not linked to their Active Directory, doesn't connect to the network, doesn't use the same admin credentials to access it. So in the event of something happening to either components of their main Azure subscription or this Azure subscription as a whole and becomes compromised, we can restore critical systems either back into that subscription or bring them up within the second air-gapped environment in a fast and efficient way. We're now also looking at how we can add an on-premise object-first appliance to create ultimate resiliency for the customer on-site and create an environment where they can really bring up their critical systems in a way that suits their business needs. So as we've mentioned, IT and security teams operate in silos, but in a crisis, that's really a recipe for disaster. So we need shared playbooks, joint incidents response plans, joint drills. Everyone should know what their role is before the attack happens and who to engage with in either team if an attack does happen. So to kind of sum it up into top 5 tips, I like to just get things into a top 5 where possible because it makes it easier to consume. You'll see that the term unified is mentioned more than once. So as long as we continue to perform these tasks in isolation, we increase the risks associated to our technology environments. My view is don't wait for your compatriots and other teams to reach out and solve this. They're probably not thinking about it or don't want to reach out. But make the call now, create a joint approach. It'll save you in the long run. So I hope the importance of bringing these silos together is getting clearer for you. So to wrap up kind of my part of this, backup's no longer about tick box for auditors, as I said. It's general or for general recovery. It's about defense. And that means working together. It's your last line of protection when everything else fails. And that's why it should be treated by as a security and business operations priority, not one or the other. We've explored how ransomware has kind of fundamentally changed the role of backup. We've kind of seen how attackers are targeting backups first, and why IT and security leaders should work together to build true resilience. But understanding the threat is only half the battle. But to win the ransomware war, we need to go beyond traditional defenses and rethink how we design our backup environments as well, how we do that from the ground up. So that's exactly what we'll explore next. So with that, I'll hand over to Darren, who will take us into the next phase of this presentation and showing us how zero trust principles can be applied to backup and recovery, and how we can build a ransomware-proof foundation for your business. So I'll hand over to you, Darren.
Excellent. Thank you so much, JK. Brilliant insight there into why we need to be hardening our backup repositories. So it leads very nicely into my presentation. Just bear with me a second, I'll bring my slides up. Okay, brilliant. So today we're going to talk about zero trust and why we believe zero trust model needs to evolve beyond your production infrastructure. So we're going to cover quite a few stats today, so bear with me as we go through it, but it's needed in order to paint a very good picture of where we are today in terms of cyber resilience and cybersecurity. So I'm Darren from Object First. I look after the channel, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Now, you're probably wondering who Object First is. That's if you haven't heard of us by now. We were founded in 2022 by Ratmir Timoshev and Andrei Baranov. They are the same founders of Veeam. And as of January this year, we are now owned by Veeam as well. So we are the Veeam storage appliance. So, like I said, little scene setting. We're going to go through some research from ESG, as well as the Veeam Ransomware Trends Report, and our own research as well. So what we've seen is that 66% of organizations today suffered some form of ransomware attack. Of that, 34% that say they have not experienced a ransomware attack in the last 2 years either are not aware of an attack or they may not want to disclose. So while we say 66% is a fairly large number, it's very interesting to see that, there's also quite a large number that say that they haven't been attacked. But what's more interesting, if we look at the 66% that have responded yes, a large percentage of them have been attacked multiple times. At least 38% has been attacked twice, and a large percentage on multiple occasions. So let's not make any mistake about it. Your backups are being targeted. Now, if you think about the business model of a ransom attack, they want to ensure that you've got absolutely no form of recovery, which is why they will target your backups. That being your last line of defense, they want to cut that off. So, and what we've seen as well is that of those companies that do recover, less than 50% can recover in a business week. So what does that mean for your organization if you're not able to recover your data within 1 working week? Another very interesting stat here is that 25% recovered half or less of their data. So let's assume that percentage of that 50% had paid a ransom. Paying a ransom, firstly, is supporting illegal activity because you don't know where that funds are being directed to. Secondly, you're not guaranteed to get all of your data back. So remember, you're dealing with a criminal outfit at the end of the day, not a large enterprise that has SLAs in place. You getting your data back is based on their best effort. And let's face it, once they are paid, they've already won. So they don't really care too much about getting your data to you. But let's not forget that there's also a human element behind these attacks. From the companies surveyed, a large percentage said they report feeling uncomfortable or stressed around the risks of IT in their business. So they don't feel that their business is secure enough. 78% fear that security incidents will be blamed on them, regardless of the situation. At the end of the day, a finger needs to be pointed at someone and someone needs to lose their head if the business impact is significant enough. And almost 60% of IT admins say they've considered or are actively looking for new jobs due to pressures of the IT cyber role. And also 74% say that the techs and the tools that they're using today just doesn't cut it or doesn't meet the standards that's required. What's also very interesting is before an attack, 69% of organizations felt very confident in the ability to recover from an attack. That confidence level dropped by 20% after an attack. So you may think you're prepared today, but have you tested your systems? Are you confident enough that you can recover within SLAs in the event of an outage? So just some key takeaways from what I've already discussed. Cyber attacks. It's not about if you're going to get attacked, it's about when. Backups are at risk. That's the only way that a cyber or bad actor can ensure that you cannot recover. Disruptions to businesses are huge. There's also staff retention or staff turnover that's a concern. Prepared, that may be questionable. We need to ensure that we're testing regularly so to ensure that we can recover within SLA. And the techs and tools that we're using today just may not be up to the job. So data resilience is needed, but how? This brings me to the zero trust framework. So this is a framework that's very common and probably applied within your infrastructure today. Right? We assume breach. We assume that there's always going to be an attack, regardless of how secure we built our infrastructure. We need to verify explicitly. So we use tools like MFAs or IAMs to ensure that the right people are getting access to the systems. And we use least privilege access. So not every user has access to every system. We use role-based access for that. So this is great at an infrastructure level, but how do we apply this down to the backup level? And this is where Veeam, in conjunction with a security company called Numberline, developed the Zero Trust Data Resilience Principles. What this means is that we should have clear segmentation of backup software and backup storage. So that should be physically separated. You don't want your backup software running within the same cluster as your backup storage. We need to ensure that we have multiple resilience zones. And this talks to the 32110 rule that Jonathan has mentioned. Just a quick recap on that rule. We need 3 copies of your data. 3 copies, first being production, the second being your primary backup, and third being your secondary backup. 2 separate media. So 1 on disk and 1 in the cloud, or 1 off-site or tape for that matter. The 1 is for the 1 off-site. The additional 1 is for the 1 immutable or air-gapped copy, and the 0 is for 0 failures because of continuous testing. Now I saw that, I think it was George that mentioned in the chat, your backups is only as good as what's been tested. So if you cannot guarantee you can recover from the backup, then there's no point in even doing the backup, right? So you've got to ensure that you're using the best practices and features that's available to you within the Veeam platform to automate those processes. Lastly, what's key to the whole framework is immutable backup storage. If you've developed all of this, but your storage layer is compromised or can be accessed, then none of this matters. So we have to ensure that your backup storage has absolutely zero risk, access for destructive actions. So what does that look like in a diagram? So you can see we've got production or hybrid cloud data. So you've got physical, you've got virtual, you've got cloud, and we assume that has been breached. Now, each of those services has multiple lines of communication into your backup software. So we have to assume that is breached as well, and that represents a fairly large attack surface. Then we're going to what we say should be your target appliance that allows for zero destructive actions. Ideally, you want this on an S3 protocol. And you can see there's only a single line of communication between the backup server and the target appliance. This represents a minimal attack surface, but we still assume that the appliance has been breached. Even though the appliance has been breached, because there's zero access for destructive actions, the data within the appliance cannot be altered, deleted, or encrypted. But we don't just stop there. We say that we need to have multiple resilient zones. So your secondary backup either sits within a secure offsite data center, a service provider, or one of the public clouds, be it AWS, Azure, or Veeam's Data Cloud Vault. So we talk about immutability or absolute immutability. A lot of companies out there talk about their storage being immutable, but it means nothing if it can be compromised with a breach, meaning that if you've got an admin or super admin that has access down to a level where you can alter, change immutability settings, or delete backups, that is not ideal, but that is not truly immutable. What absolute immutability means is that even the most privileged admin or attacker with those admin's details cannot modify or delete your data. So that's something we need to verify. Ideally, you want a backup storage solution that has been third-party penetration tested as well. It's not good enough if the vendor that's telling you about immutability says they do their own internal penetration testing. Ideally, it should be third-party pen tested. So how do we achieve absolute immutability? One is by using S3 object storage. The main reason for that is that the S3 protocol is an open source protocol, and it does allow for third-party pen testing. It's not proprietary. Secondly, we want to ensure that our backup storage has zero time to immutability, meaning that as soon as the backups are written to that appliance, it is rendered immutable. We're not going into a landing zone first and then going into a retention layer, or there's no time stamp or time delayed immutability. Thirdly, you should have a purpose-built target appliance, not something that's been hashed together or DIY'd. By meeting these requirements, your organizations can ensure that whatever happens, ransomware, insider threats, or even credential breaches, your backup data remains protected. So what does that infrastructure look like with Object First? And you'll see the word would be on your screen. That stands for out of the box immutability. That is what we call our Object First nodes. So again, those nodes represent zero access for destructive actions using the S3 protocol. Now we can have an Object First node sitting at a service provider, a secondary data center, or you can leverage the S3 buckets that sit within AWS, Azure, or Veeam. The Object First appliance is third-party penetration tested, and that's done on an annual basis. We use a company called the NCC, which is a UK-based organization, a bunch of ethical hackers and they do an annual test on a device and provide a report back to say that the device cannot be compromised in any shape, way, or form. So again, that's peace of mind. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I will hand over to Marv shortly, but just want you to think about some of the principles that we discussed today. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but something I want to ensure that you leave with today is checking whether your storage layer is truly immutable. We heard Jonathan talk about cyber insurance. One of the key criteria in order for a cyber insurance company to pay out is for them to ensure that you've got immutable backups. If you don't have immutable backups in place and you are paying an insurance premium, chances are they may refuse the claim when you need to claim. Having these type of measures in place, although where it's verified immutability, could reduce your premiums as well. So this is something to look into. Thank you for your time. Marv, over to you.
All right, thank you so much. I'm just going to pick up right off. Just confirming that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Marv Antin and I cover pre-sales here at Object First across our teams. And the conversation I want to have with you today really is continuing on from where Darren stopped. So we've talked about how we started, our vision and our founders, and the fact that we're now a part of the Veeam company. Now, I've started from this point because I wanted to talk about the original idea that went into creating the solution that we have today. And after some market research, what we were seeing in the industry was showing that there was a need for a solution that's a backup appliance that can guarantee the security of the data that sits on it, but also hitting the 3 points across secure, simple, powerful. And so we were seeing that there's many solutions in the industry, across the industry today, but you find that they're really powerful, but also really complex, or they're really complex, and then that creates some sort of kind of security gaps just because of how long and how much expertise is required to make it secure. And there's an understanding that what a Veeam user needs, because they're already getting this really good technology from a backup software perspective, they needed something that matched that from an appliance perspective as well. And so still in this early days of research, we kind of went into the market and got an understanding of what customers are using today. And across the board, we have, we've picked out the top 3 options that we see most common. First of which is the direct attached storage. And this has been around in the industry for a really long time. And you find that it is really simple to use, mostly again, because of how long it's been in existence. It can be as powerful as the solution, the actual hardware that it sits on. However, there is a huge security risk here around. So if you reference what Darren talked about with the data resilience principles, he talked about kind of the segmentation of backup software and storage. It's impossible to have that in a direct attached storage situation. And so a compromise of one half of that solution means the entire environment is compromised. Looking at DDoS appliances, again, when it comes to being powerful, it can be as powerful as the solution that it sits on. However, it is not simple. So it can be quite complex to set it up in a way that works efficiently for your environment. But another thing that we kind of talk about here is just the fact that there is an admin that is setting the immutability, and that admin has the kind of power and authority to remove the immutability that they have set. So even though the kind of area for infiltration is quite small, because it usually is cut down to maybe just one admin with godlike powers within the system, it still exists. We also see with Veeam hardened repository, this is a great option for organizations that have Linux expertise or are a lot more comfortable in the DIY solution. So they're able to put that together. They have the expertise. The simplicity aspect of that, of course, relies on knowing that there is a team member who knows how to do that. You are, responsible for like the patching and the updates and testing. However, it doesn't come just all pre-built. And that's kind of where we come in. We're trying to make sure that, or in creating our solution, we're trying to make sure that we're able to take yes across all three primary pillars, which brings us to where we are today. Our solution is secure, simple, and powerful, and that's one thing we always want anyone we're talking to take away from the conversations that we're having. We're providing absolute immutability across the board. So there is no admin, there is no position within the organization that has access to destructive actions. And when we package this together, we refer to it as a ransomware-proof solution. Now, one of our company's mission is that no one using our solution alongside with Veeam will ever be in a position where they will have to pay ransom. And so when we call ourselves a ransomware-proof solution, we're not saying that you won't be hit by ransomware. We actually, if you follow, refer back to the principles we talked about earlier, we always assume breach. So we assume that you have either already been hit or will be hit in the future. But we are saying that you will be in a position where you wouldn't have to even consider paying ransom because one, you'll have access to that data. And two, you'll be able to trust that it is immutable. And so you can trust that whatever data you wrote to it is what you're receiving back because it has not been tampered with. Over the next few slides, I'll go into a bit more detail on each pillar. So just to talk about why we're using object storage, this is a question that we get fairly often, and primarily is just that we have found that object storage doesn't have the same limitations as traditional file systems. Because of how the metadata is stored with the object storage, you're able to take advantage of things like the instant recovery function, which I'll talk about in a few moments as well. Utilizing the S3 protocol, we're able to take advantage also of the S3 native object lock that supports that immutability function as well. When we look at block storage and dedupe appliances, as we saw on the previous slide, from a technology level, so this is regardless of the vendor that is, because of how dedupe works and how the data kind of compresses in on itself, it takes a huge performance impact on the solution when you're trying to restore, and it can take a really long time as well. So if you look at Veeam's support pages on their website, it does say that if there's any subset of your data that you need to recover from quickly, you need to make sure that that subset of data has not been deduped. And again, this is just at a technology level, as opposed to being vendor specific. And so all of these kind of put together, made it quite easy for us to know that object storage was the way that we're going to go with the solution that we're bringing out into the market. So when we're looking at the security pillar here, a lot of the emphasis here is on the zero trust data resilience principles that we've looked at already. So that separation and segmentation of the backup software and hardware, not just a logical but physical separation as well. And having zero time to immutability. This means that when you're creating an S3 bucket on on our user interface, it gives you a picture like this where it says you name your bucket, and this says that it is already by default ticked for immutability, and you click create, and the bucket is immutable right off the bat. So there is no extra step or configuration that you need to do in order to make sure that the buckets that you're creating, where your data will sit in, are immutable. So here's the report that we were referencing earlier from the NCC group as well. So they're basically a group of ethical hackers, and what we've done is simulate a ransomware situation. And so we gave them our source codes, admin credentials, all the passwords. And what we're trying to understand from this test is if we have been infiltrated and we have, and the ransomware attackers have kind of taken all of our credentials and all of our codes, what happens next? And this test was done over a series of 54 days, and this is the final report. And this is available on our website and can be shared with you afterwards as well. But I just want to highlight this subset of the report that says, even if all the customer's secrets, including the administrator credentials, the bucket credentials, are all known to the attacker still cannot modify data that has been stored on an UTB appliance. Now, this is a huge differentiator for us because we are very aware that as a storage vendor, not many, if any, storage vendors allow for their kit to be tested externally. Many would have it within their contract to not. And we've just taken the completely opposite direction of that, where we, not just trust in the product that we've created, but we want external validation around testing the features that we're giving out, putting out into the market. So we have our second pillar as simple. You're able to go box to backup within 15 minutes. And this has been tested many times. When we have, our sales teams do this, they're able to do it in about 30 minutes. And that is with like no training at all. And so it is such an easy process. All you have to do is, put in the IP addresses for the 2 network cards you have, the cluster IP address, choose your username and your password, and you have access to the user interface where you can then go ahead to do things like setting up multi-factor authentication. You're also able to scale. So with, we'll talk about the node sizes in a bit, but as soon as when you create, when you're doing the initial configuration, you start by creating a cluster. You're able to add more nodes to the cluster, and every time it's an easier process because the initial configuration kind of anticipates that there will be growth and scaling, and you're able to scale up to 4 nodes within the cluster. We also, so Veeam will encrypt your data. We receive Veeam's encrypted data, so we don't turn off that encryption. And actually, that's a great point to mention when we talk about DDoS appliances as well, because kind of referencing back a few slides ago, you're not really able to see the huge numbers of savings on DDoS technology on data that has already been pre-compressed or pre-encrypted in any way. And so there's often a requirement to turn off that encryption and encrypt the data at rest. However, from all the stat points that we've seen here today, understanding that the backups are now the primary target, we just don't want any loopholes. And so we don't turn off Veeam's encryption, and we just receive it like that and send it back to you as such. And so the user interface that you'll be working with is very easy to use, intuitive, wizard-driven, so it tells you where to go and what to do. And again, all of that setup you're able to do from the moment you power on the UTB node. Within 15 minutes, you can be up receiving your backups already. Our last pillar here is powerful. So each node within our small and medium scale size, that's our 2U chassis nodes, will provide 1 gigabyte per second ingress speed, and about half of that, so about 600 to 800 on recovery. We do have our larger nodes, the 432 terabyte node, which will give you 2 gigabyte per second ingress speed and about half of that on recovery. When you add more nodes to the cluster, you increase capacity and performance. So there is no performance degradation as a result of adding more nodes to the cluster, because we do, like I said, expect that you will be able to grow and add more nodes to your cluster. I mentioned instant recovery earlier. So how that works is, in the case of an incident, our UTB node will actually be able to operate as primary storage. So you would just need to provide it with some compute, the CPU and memory, and spin up the VMs directly from the UTB node. And this means that if you have been hit, within minutes, you're able to spin up those VMs because you're not migrating anywhere. You're just using the UTB node as storage and spinning up the interface that way. And as soon as you have a clean environment again, you can then migrate to production where you see those high recovery numbers as talked about earlier. Each node will support 20 instant recovery sessions, and within a full cluster, you can see between 80 to 100 sessions being supported. And here is just showing you again the flow of data. Everything we say, to our customer, everything you do in Veeam today, if you're a Veeam user, you continue to do. All of the configuration, the setting up of the backup policies, your retention policy, all of that still happens on the Veeam platform if you're VBR. However, all you're changing is the repository where your data is sitting. So you're able to create an object storage repository choose the UTB node and choose the bucket that you would have, the immutable bucket that you would have created, so that S3 bucket, and your data will start to sit into that repository. Now, in the case where you have multiple sites, very often customers would have a secondary location or maybe a managed service provider that's having the UTB node and providing that as a backup as a service, or a cloud provider. So as much as our solution is transformative, it is not as disruptive to your already existing environment. So should you have a cloud provider that you're utilizing for much longer term retention, that's absolutely fine, as the integration will work with Veeam, and you're able to utilize the backup copy or the scale-out backup repository tools to send your data to various locations. With the scale-out backup repository, you'll be able to have 3 tiers. So you have a performance tier where your UTB would sit as your primary backup target, your capacity tier, which could be another UTB node in a physical location, or a service provider, whether that be private or public. And the archive tier is only with Amazon Glacier, and there is a caveat there that you need to be using AWS for your capacity tier. But outside of that, everything else works pretty much as I've said. We also utilize a few functionalities with Veeam. So with Object First UTB, we would require you to be on at least version 12. And this is because of the SOS API functionality, which supports things like the instant recovery function I talked about earlier, accelerated data movement, capacity and space visibility. But it also has a unique feature called Smart Entities. So Smart Entities is primarily responsible for auto load balancing of your workloads, and it does this at a node level and at a cluster level. So it's responsible for the direct placement of data across the concurrent streams that you have within your solution. To show you how this works out, say you have a single node here connected into this architectural setup where you have your SOS API integrated. Each node will have 2 network cards. They'll be dual active and have IP addresses assigned to them. In this case here, say you create a bucket and you have these VMs. At the single node level, your smart entities will be auto load balancing the VMs that you have across these 2 points. And if you add another node to this cluster, the first thing that happens, because we don't limit the bucket growth, it will just pull in the capacity that it's seen. And now you have 4 points that smart entities will be auto load balancing across. There is no way to manually kind of interfere with this. All of this happens automatically. And as you add more nodes to the cluster, the bucket will continue to expand, and you can see that smart entities will be moving those VMs around as well. If you have any M365 data, we will fully support backing that up. It is not yet integrated with the SOS API. We believe that this is in the roadmap to address. But in the meantime, while you might not have access to instant recovery for M365 data specifically, you are able to have a version of that on-prem in an immutable storage that you can recover from and see those really high speeds when you're migrating to production. So we've come up with a few new features recently. We have the honeypot, and this acts as a kind of like a dummy VBR decoy within your environment. It is a free service. All you have to do within the user interface is click enable and assign the IP address. Now, what happens here is that if your environment has been infiltrated, the hopes is that they will trigger, because they will always try to attack your VBR anyways. And so they were hoping that they'll see this and they'll think that's your actual VBR. As a decoy, it will set off an alarm and you will get the alert immediately, but it will also ping where the IP address is coming from so that it can help your own internal investigations. Fleet Manager is for any end user that has more than one UTB. So we have quite a number of end users across the board globally that have UTBs across various data centers. This will be very identical to the user interface we use today, but it will allow you to be able to manage from a single pane of glass, which just makes it much easier. And finally, to just look at what goes into the box itself. So you have a custom hardened Linux OS, which is in a mirror RAID, and that helps with that business continuity. We have an NVMe flash cache. There's just the one of this, and of course that helps with the faster writes. Our support SLA is next business day. So if there's anything wrong with that NVMe flash cache, the backups will ping that layer a few times. If it remains unresponsive, then it will just skip and write straight to capacity while you get the replacement the following day. This means that your backups don't have to stop because that layer is not working, and once you get your replacement by the following day, you're able to, alongside with our support, put that in and pick back up on the speeds. So the form factors for 2U chassis across the board, and we have different node sizes. All of them will have RAID 6 array in terms of how the disks are set up, and this just allows for that extra protection. So within that small and medium range size, you are able to lose up to 3 drives before you're at risk of data loss or unavailability. And then we have those much larger nodes that doubles on that. This shows you just the range that we have. So we're able to support end users across the board from as low as 8 terabytes because we have the desktop minis, and we have different sizes of nodes that scale. Obviously, when you put them together within a cluster and add those clusters within your scale-out backup repository, we're able to go as far as 7 petabytes and more. So to give you an idea of what the picture looks like here, the would-be minis are kind of desktop towers for like edge locations where there's not a full data center or there's just no rack space. And then for data centers, you're able to see the sizes that we have. And this is just a picture of what the would-be node looks like. This brings me to the end of kind of just giving you an insight into the technical conversations that we have. And if you would like to have a further conversation, or if you'd like to have a demo to see how this works, we're happy for you to kind of get in touch. But at this time, I'll just hand back over to the team. Thank you.
Okay, I was trying to find my unmute button there. Right, thank you, everyone. Thanks to Darren and Marv. If there's any questions, I see we haven't got anything in the Q&A, so, and we're actually just about out of time, so we don't want to keep all of you, but my details are here on the screen. Either email me directly, or you can email our info address for any questions, and we can direct them to the right people, or to have any further discussions post this session. So I just want to thank Marv and Darren and all of you, and we'll close it there. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks. Bye.